I just want to point out that I learned tonight that Bernie Mac was in a movie called Mr. 3000 where he was playing baseball. And then also Kevin Costner was Superman's dad and got sucked in a tornado.
Yes.
Where the fuck have I been?
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we ask, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Gene Lyons. Alongside me are my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And our special return guest, Drew from the One Headlight Podcast.
God, I love baseball.
And together we're going to take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. Each week, the audience selects from 6 movie choices, and we break out the race car VHS tape rewinder and watch the movie that tallied the highest number of votes. At the end of the podcast, Big D, Drew, and I will provide the audience with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off our respective bums, so find a comfortable spot on the sofa and accompany us for a journey through our vast VHS movie collection. If you'd like to download Shat the Movies, you can get it via iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Pandora, TuneIn, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are found. Big D, we got another commissioned movie, Money, Money, Money in the Bank.
You're going to make it sound like we're wealthy and people are going to stop contributing?
Right.
That is not the case.
Yeah,
yes,
we hired Drew.
Yeah. Yeah, so we had a commission by Carmelita, one of our longtime listeners, who wanted to do Pee-wee's Big Adventure. The next day, Vince direct messages and said, hey, I want to commission Pee-wee's Big Adventure. So we said, we can't do them. Can you pick another movie? Baseball's opening day is right around the corner in 2 weeks. So Vince, luckily, one of his other backup movies was one of my favorites. It matches opening day perfectly. So we will be covering and releasing this on Major League Baseball's opening day 2019, the 1984 baseball classic, The Natural.
Well, Vince, you are very generous. Thanks so much for commissioning this podcast. Vince writes in, Dear Carrie, Gene, and Big D, first, I'm a longtime listener and first-time donor. I started listening to your podcast for Game of Thrones after season 7. I listened to the Top Gun episode. I was hooked and went back and listened to every single one. When I decided to commission a podcast, I originally wanted Pee-wee's Big Adventure because it's a favorite of mine. But when someone beat me to it, I chose a different movie. I put together a list and started narrowing it down. With the help of Big D, we went with the 1984 classic, The Natural. This is one of my favorites growing up, and the point of Shat the Movies is to see if our favorites still hold up. With spring training arriving and baseball season approaching, what better movie to watch than this one? Like countless kids, I grew up loving baseball. If I wasn't playing baseball, I was watching, reading, studying the game. I loved everything about it, including the movies. Well, most of them. The Natural was always my favorite. I couldn't figure out why at the time, but anytime it was on, I stopped what I was doing and watched it. As with countless other movies, my first memories of it were watching it with my dad. Growing up, my dad and I bonded over 2 things, baseball and movies. I remember coming home from school, and if the weather was nice, we threw the ball around. If the weather was terrible, we watched movies. That's how I saw most of the movies reviewed by Shat the Movies, despite being one of the younger listeners. Those times spent with my dad are some of my favorite moments, and I would still do anything to have that back. Now, getting to the movie itself. The famous scenes always stuck with me. Wonder Boy, striking out the whammer, the final scene. I came across it again as a teenager when I started learning more about movies, storytelling, and filmmaking. It came across at the right time because this is a film that offered more than a shallow script, unlike Major League, another baseball movie you reviewed. In The Natural, there is more to this story than baseball. It focuses on the story of its hero and his journey to becoming the best there ever was. The cinematography, lighting, and wardrobe frankly taught me more about plot devices than any English class from high school. It's been a long time since I really sat down and watched. I'm curious whether the movie holds up. My gut feeling is the story is the traditional hero's journey we've seen countless times and could at times come across as campy or too obvious. The performances of Duvall and Redford will likely still hold up and keep the film going. I'll sit down and watch it again before the episode airs. Thank you for reviewing a childhood classic of mine. And that comes from Vince.
Vince, I want to thank you. And I'm glad to hear that this movie has an emotional connection to you and your father. Growing up, my father was not a baseball fan. I kind of stumbled upon it on my own. So it's nice to hear that we can somehow rekindle those good memories. So thanks again.
Yeah, Vince, like you, I'm also a huge fan of baseball and this movie in general. And about a year or so ago, I was kind of thinking to myself, like, why do I like baseball so much? And I used to love all four main sports growing up, but baseball has been the only one I still really deeply care about now. And then one random day after thinking about it, kind of dawned on me. So growing up, I actually was bullied quite a bit. And I started playing baseball when I was 9, and it took me about 2 years to really get the hang of things. But when I did, baseball really helped create an identity and kind of like a safe space for me. Now, I wasn't going to make it to the majors by any means, but I did pretty well for myself. I remember when I was 15, I won a batting title. And yes, I still have the trophy. And yes, my wife yells at me every time I try to put it on the mantle over our fireplace. But when I was on the field, and even the day after games, like those bullies would usually leave me alone, thanks to what I did on the field. 2 days after the games, though, usually all bets were off. But at least I had some kind of bully-free time, which was a complete blessing back then. And also, I know, Vince, you said you spent a lot of time with your dad, playing baseball. Also, my dad would always help me practice baseball on weekends, and we would go to like a local school, and he would toss me some batting practice for hours. It seemed like, which I absolutely loved back then, and I love it even more now. Being a parent, you look at things with a different lens and appreciate things differently. And knowing my dad had a demanding job, yet still took time to play baseball with me, I'll never forget that. And I know as a parent now, how exhausted I am after a day at work. So when my girls ask for something, I try to keep that in mind and, do everything I can to spend time with them. So to me, baseball, and I think like with you as well, Vince, and even you, Big D, baseball is more than just a game.
Fuck, we got to get Drew off the podcast. He's trying to give me a running for fucking Super Dad. He's trying to take my crown. I spend time after work. I don't like this shit. I want to be the solo dad.
Well, I don't have any children and I never had a dad, so
God.
I do have notes about The Natural, though. It's a 1984 American sports film based on Bernard Malamud's 1952 novel of the same name, directed by Barry Levinson and starring Robert Redford, Glenn Close, and Robert Duvall. The film recounts the experiences of Roy Hobbs, an individual with a great natural baseball talent spanning the decades of Roy's career. It was the first film produced by TriStar Pictures. It was nominated for 4 Academy Awards, including Best Supporting Actress for Glenn Close, and nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actress in Kim Basinger. Many of the baseball scenes were filmed in 1983 at War Memorial Stadium in Buffalo, New York, built in 1937 and demolished in 1988. All High Stadium, also in Buffalo, stood in for Chicago's Wrigley Field in a key scene. So, guys, we've talked a little bit about our memories of baseball. Big D, what's your memory of this movie, The Natural?
So unlike Drew, I do not have a batting title to my name, but I did play high school baseball. I dabbled a bit in college, and I can remember that the end of the movie fired us up so much that I took a tape recorder and we did an audio recording of the last inning, and we used to play it on the bus going on road trips. You're covering your eyes, but come on, it fired us up. That music still gives me like goosebumps. So I don't remember the first place I saw this, but watching it now, man, I've probably seen this movie 20, 25 times.
How about you, Drew?
Yeah, so I was about 4 when this came out, so I didn't see it in theaters, but I saw it when I was around 8 or 9, either HBO or on VHS after being recorded from HBO. But I haven't watched it in some time now, probably like at least has to be 20 years since I've seen it last. But I remember liking it when I was younger, and I think this really is kind of like a true test. Like, does this movie that we loved years ago, does it still hold up to this day?
Yeah, surprisingly, guys, I've never seen The Natural. But I'm a big fan of sports movies. And so, that debate always seems to come up on road trips or in the office, or whatever, like greatest sports movie of all time. And The Natural is always in that conversation. I've always thought like Bull Durham is probably my favorite sports movie. Again, another baseball movie. I think baseball really lends itself well to film because there's so much dugout interaction and so many characters. Also, people aren't wearing a lot of gear, so you can kind of see what's going on. Friday Night Lights, I also really liked a lot, and the series as well. But I've never seen The Natural, and I was hoping really in watching this, I would find a new favorite here. And I got to say, it's a pretty damn good movie.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Big D.
I'm agreeing. I like to see it when you're surprised. Your cold, frozen, dead heart is starting to show some signs of life.
All right, with that, let's get to the trailer.
Someday when people look at me, they'll say, there goes Roy Hobbs, the best there ever was.
TriStar Pictures presents Robert Redford in The Natural, the story of a father and a son.
You got a gift, Roy, but it's not enough.
Of love.
He means the world to me.
And desire.
I'm not waiting for true love to come along, Roy.
A champion.
A Roy Hobbs comes along once, maybe twice in everybody's lifetime.
And his destiny.
With or without the records, they'll remember you.
Best there is now, and best there ever will be.
I wouldn't bet against me.
I already have.
Robert Redford, Robert Duvall, Glenn Close, Kim Basinger, Wilford Brimley, Barbara Hershey, Robert Prosky, and Richard Farnsworth as Red. The Natural.
In the 1910s, Roy Hobbs learns to play baseball from his father. One afternoon, the elder Hobbs collapses under a mighty oak tree and dies. Shortly thereafter, lightning strikes the oak tree during a thunderstorm. Hobbs takes a piece of the tree and carves it down into a baseball bat, writing the name Wonder Boy into the barrel. Several years later, a 19-year-old Hobbs, played by a 46-year-old Robert Redford, boards a train to Chicago Cubs tryouts. He meets a legendary ball player nicknamed Whammer, the best hitter in the big leagues, as well as sports writer Max Mercy, played by Robert Duvall.
But God, how nice is it? We start out, and how many times do we see actors who you can tell cannot play a sport? I mean, we joked about Damon Wayans in The Last Boy Scout about how he throws, and you could tell he's never thrown a football. Robert Redford is the natural. His pitching motion is fluid. He actually earned a scholarship to the University of Colorado to play baseball. During rehearsals, they tell stories about him hitting multiple bombs. And it just made me think of all the bad baseball actors we've seen. John Goodman in The Babe, awful. Bernie Mac, yeah, I think about baseball with that clown and Mr. 3000. Freddie Prinze Jr. in the Cape Cod League Classic Summer Catch. But the worst by far, Gary Busey as Chet Rocketman Stedman in Rookie of the Year. Awful.
Wait, what the fuck was Mr. 3000?
It was a ball player who's trying to get his 3000th career hit, right? And he goes to a bad team.
And it's Bernie Mac?
It was horrible.
Yeah.
That sounds fucking awful.
7 wipes minimum.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that movie you mentioned, Freddie Prinze Jr. in Summer Catch, that movie was in general terrible, but along with Freddie Prinze, Matthew Lillard, Shaggy was also horrible. And also Wesley Snipes in Major League was not that proficient at baseball either.
Was he fast, though, I think is the question. You know, Big D, you mentioned that Robert Redford is a natural baseball player and perfect for this role. And really, if you're looking for a guy who's supposed to be, you know, in his mid to late 30s, coming back to the game, but still has it in him, he's got kind of a perfectly weathered look, but also is spry and lithe and athletic. I think he is a perfect pick. But man, having a 46-year-old Robert Redford play a 19-year-old, just a weird choice.
Fuck. I mean, we get spoiled because we do True Detective. And this season, they had Stephen Dorff and Mahershala Ali, who range from like maybe their 30s into their like almost 70s. And the makeup looks believable. It looks real. You feel like they're aged. Did they even make an effort to make Robert Redford look young? I felt like I was watching 21 Jump Street when they have fucking like Channing Tatum pretending to be like an 18-year-old and like, dude, you're a 40-year-old.
I think the one point where I was like, okay, I get what, if you notice, he's really the only like close-ups or dialogue scenes are kind of in the dark. Like he goes to visit Iris at night. And so I was like, oh, okay, cool. They're going to keep him in the dark. That way they don't have to deal with the fact that he's old. I think they gave him like maybe like a little bit of a wig or something too. Looked kind of like a Raggedy Ann sort of wig. But then you see him on the train in like broad daylight. I'm like, wait, they're still trying to go with 19 here?
Yeah, and Big D, I know you were mentioning that Robert Redford is, the natural. And I love nicknames like that. Like, I love baseball nicknames in here and in general, right? You have the Bats nickname is Wonder Boy. You have Whammer, Hobbs is the natural. I feel like baseball players in general have the best nicknames. There's Shoeless Joe Jackson, who actually played around that same time. Lou Gehrig was the Iron Horse. Don Mattingly is Donnie Baseball. Fred McGriff, one of my favorites, is the Crime Dog. And probably the best nickname of them all was Dennis Oil Can Boyd, who actually got his nickname from his beer drinking days back in Mississippi, where they used to call beer oil. So that was a great nickname.
I think baseball definitely is the best sport for nicknames. But for all of its charms, the movie is not flawless. They do a great job of zipping through the setup to get to the meat of it. But in that, you have a scene that I think is supposed to have some great impact on us, which is the father dying and the splitting of the tree by lightning. And if you blinked, you missed. If you went to the bathroom or decided to have even a couple potato chips, you're going to miss this part. The dad dies. And I was like, wait, he's dead? It was like the quietest heart attack. And then nobody seems to give a shit. Like, everybody just goes about life. Like, he's like, I think I'll make a bat.
Yeah. Didn't Clark Kent's dad in the original have a heart attack? Not the one where it was Kevin Costner and the tornado sucked him up. In the original, didn't his dad have a heart attack too?
Kevin Costner was Superman?
He was Superman. He was Clark Kent's father in Man of Steel. So he gets sucked up by a tornado. But I think in the original movie with Christopher Reeves, I think his dad has a heart attack too. But it's like one of those, like, at least they help, sprawl around. This guy, he looked like he took a knee.
Yeah, he's taking a nap on dad. I just want to point out that I learned tonight that Bernie Mac was in a movie called Mr. 3000 where he was playing baseball. And then also Kevin Costner was Superman's dad and got sucked in a tornado.
Yes.
Where the fuck have I been?
I don't know.
So the passengers visit a carnival where Hobbs easily wins at a game requiring him to knock over a stack of bottles with a ball. On a bet, Hobbs strikes out Whammer on 3 pitches. The feat catches the attention of Harriet Bird, a mysterious woman who had been fawning over Whammer. They all travel to Chicago, where Bird phones Hobbs and invites him to her hotel room. Thinking Hobbs might become the best baseball player that ever was, Bird shoots Hobbs in the abdomen.
So one of the things that struck me almost right away is how everything seems period appropriate. It feels like we're in the 30s. There's never a moment that I'm like, that's modern day Chicago, and they just put old vintage cars. It is beautiful. The shot when he has the duel with the Whammer, there's like bugs in the air. There's some smoke from the train, the carnival in the background. And then as Hobbs starts going into his slow motion, the wind up and the pitch, the sun is setting behind him. It is simply beautiful as a film to watch.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I also discovered during this scene that trains had to stop for water. And I'm like, why has no movie ever shown me that? It makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. But they made it plausible too from a storyline perspective of like, how do they end up at a carnival? And I remember when I was putting in the notes for this podcast, I was like, that doesn't make sense. Why would they be at a carnival? Well, they made it a plausible storyline there. And again, kind of like you were saying, Big D, with the setup from the environment, they also did a story setup where although these fantastic mythological feats are happening, nothing seems unnatural, or no pun intended, or out of place. It all flows beautifully together.
Pro athletes now could never do like a competition like that. First off, the teams would have specific verbiage probably in their contract stating they can't do that kind of stuff. They don't want to risk injury to these, multi-million-dollar investments. It reminded me of when Jeff Kent was hurt washing his car, and I'm absolutely using air quotes there, in early 2000s. But yeah, it turns out he was actually riding his motorcycle doing, I think he was trying to do like wheelies, and he wound up actually getting hurt that way, which was prohibited in his contract. And second, you couldn't do something like that because the players would probably just get mobbed by fans.
Right. When we watch older movies and they have presidents and politicians and stuff too, it's kind of that same thing where the president would just like be walking down the street in DC and it's like, no big deal. You obviously can't, do that anymore. I like that they spent the time to build up this character of like this young, plucky Roy, so that when he does get shot, which by the way, kind of a weird situation in itself, where I'm like, okay, if she wanted to end his career without killing him, you think that Bird would shoot him like in the kneecap or something like that. Or if she wanted to kill him, you think that after he's down, she would kind of move up and like double tap or something like that. So her whole plan made no sense at all. And then she ends up killing herself, so she doesn't get to reap the benefits of, of all of this.
But especially one of the, I think they're talking about on the news, or there was somebody's reading the paper. She killed like 3 or 4 other people first. Don't you want to make sure this is supposed to be your coup de grace? Number one, she switches at the last moment from Whammer, who was obviously the correct target. What if Roy turned out to be nothing? What if Roy was a flash in the pan?
Oh, see, I took it as she was taking him out because he was competition for Whammer.
No, she wanted to kill somebody elite. She wanted to leave her mark.
Well, clearly he was better.
Yeah, that one time, 3 pitches. Who knows?
If you're going to kill or just wound badly in the gut.
She's a terrible shot, too. If she's killed like 3 or 4 people.
She's shooting through a veil. But this plot device is really interesting because, again, the movie on paper makes no sense at all. But when you're watching it, you're like, okay, I can go with that. And you see Robert Redford reappear as the appropriately aged Roy Hobbs later in the film. So now he's in his mid-30s and certainly old for baseball, especially in an era where I think people lived until they were like 37 was considered a senior citizen or something. But there's a transformation in who he is when the core stays the same. And that's one of the hardest things for a character to do. I always point to Breaking Bad as a great example with Bryan Cranston of being able to keep the core of the character, but change almost everything else about him. Robert Redford, as he reappears as Roy Hobbs as an adult, he's been knocked down a peg by his injury. That pluck is gone. And I feel that this is just this classic acting from a bygone era, really getting to the fundamentals of what acting is and not relying on all, camera tricks and complicated plot lines. The plot stays pretty simple. It's not too complicated. It's not cynical. They just tell a simple tale and then let the actors make you believe in it. I thought it was just really well done.
Yeah. And so one thing that might not be believable was Hobbs's bat, Wonder Boy. Now that bat lasted forever. Like most bats nowadays, they're made from like ash or maple or hickory. But one problem with maple bats is that they shatter a bit more than ash. But trends are showing that maple, I think, has actually become more popular than ash. Now, in Little League up through college, you can either use wood or aluminum, but Wonder Boy is the best bat ever. I mean, that bat lasted a whole season, basically.
Fuck no. The Wonder Boy is bullshit. There is no chance. I played in a 40-year-old plus men's adult league, and we swing wood. The wood always breaks. And the maple, the issue with them is, yes, they're harder and the ball jumps off of them, but when they break, like the jagged pieces are sharp. You're going to get somebody impaled. And a good maple bat, like the X-Bats, those are like $150. But even an average bat's $100. You would see adult men cry because inevitably you were going to break a bat. And dudes would break a bat and just be like, fuck, Jesus, there's another $150. So the fact that Wonder Boy, that bullshit tree in his front yard, no chance. No chance.
Well, he said that he boned it. So
yeah.
Important.
He's stuck it in his ass. There's no way that thing would last a full season.
That's what the lightning bolt's for. All right. In 1939, Hobbs is 35 and signed by a scout to the New York Knights, a struggling ball club sitting in last place. The team is managed by Pop Fisher, played by Wilford Brimley, who initially dislikes that Hobbs has joined the team, believing that at his age he would be more of a hindrance than a help. One day, Fisher benches star outfielder Bump Bailey, played by Michael Madsen, after a reckless play. Pop pinch hits with Hobbs, who literally knocks the cover off the baseball. Shortly after this, Bailey tragically dies when he crashes through an outfield wall trying to make a play, resulting in Hobbs being made starting outfielder. Hobbs ends up becoming a sensation and begins to turn on the Knights' fortunes around. One night, Hobbs has dinner after a game with the team's bench coach, Red Blow, where Red tells Hobbs that if Pop loses the pennant this year, then his ownership share of the team will revert to the team's majority owner, the judge, and Pop will be out of the game for good. The judge offers Hobbs a $5,000 bribe to throw the season, which Hobbs refuses.
Okay, so I don't know if this is going to be a popular take, and Drew might have some pushback here, but watching this and what I know about 30s baseball, when the Knights pitcher, Al Fowler's up there, he's maybe throwing 75. He's throwing absolute junk. It's garbage. I think I could hit it, And there's no doubt that in modern day baseball players, they train year round. They have fitness regimens. They have specialized training. There is no chance that the ball players in the 30s could even hang today. No chance.
No, yeah. I mean, so the game has changed so much over time, right? Back then, you didn't have, I don't even know if they were throwing sliders, maybe like some curves or some other junk back then, but they were not throwing like now, like you have guys throwing like 95 on average. Like if you throw 95, you're probably like a fourth or fifth starter almost. You see guys like DeGrom or Thor from the Mets. Those guys are hitting 98, 99 with regularity. So back then, it would be interesting to see like Babe Ruth, putting up those records that he did back in the day. It'd be fun to see how he would hang with guys today, or Roy Hobbs for that matter.
Well, I mean, you saw how they're training these kids. I mean, the natural Roy Hobbs, he's out on a farm playing catch with his dad and throwing balls at chicken coops. This isn't Rocky IV. Okay. So I think about my nephew. My nephew's 15 years old and he didn't make his team at school, which is not to say he sucks, but even a kid who hasn't even made the team at school for the freshman baseball team, his parents are putting him in club ball. He's got a pitching coach, 3 pitching coaches. I'm sorry. One does the pre-pitching work. One does the actual pitching, and then one does like cool down and recovery. And this is a 15-year-old kid. So you imagine the pros, they got coaches out the wazoo, allowing them. And again, like you said, Big D, the nutrition, the training regimen, there's no way the guys back in the day could hang.
Yeah, there's also the other big thing. Remember, before 47, baseball wasn't integrated. So the entire talent of the Negro leagues, of any of the Latin American players, they weren't in Major League Baseball. And the population in the U.S. in 39 was 44% of what it is today. So the talent pool was reduced. The dudes were working regular jobs and drinking beers and eating hot dogs in the dugout. There is no way. I'm sorry. You roll, and I hate to say this as a Yankee fan, you roll the 2018 Red Sox into Knight Stadium, and they're going to skunk the fucking Knights.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think you're right about that. But I think also my daughter actually was playing last year. She's 4 years old. Like they start at 4 years old now. Like, I mean, I started when I was 9. I think back then, you was starting when you're like 6 or 7 when I was a kid. They're starting even younger now. And also the facilities are so much better. When I was a kid, we had like an outdoor cage. Didn't really play in the wintertime. So you would try to do like some cardio stuff and, during the wintertime. But now they have like these indoor facilities so you can play year round.
Forget about taking BP. Roy doesn't even stretch. He gets out of the fucking train and he gasses up 3 fastballs to the whammer. How about you fucking stretch, Roy?
Not optimal for career longevity there.
No.
So I'm surprised this movie didn't kill off the whammer, because it seems to be there's a trail of death like following Roy everywhere he goes. And when he arrives in New York, Bump is in his path.
Yeah, fucking Bump. One of my problems with this movie is it's long. I mean, it's 2 hours and 20 minutes plus. You got to cut some fat. And Bump is where you do it. Bump gets benched, then immediately threatens to break Roy's bat. Boom, he dies the same day. He fucking crashes into center field, and then the team decides to sprinkle his ashes over the field and crowd? What the fuck is that? Just cut Bum out of the movie. You save 20 minutes. We're about little under 2 hours. It's a better film.
As much as I love Michael Madsen, I can't agree with you more, Big D. They didn't even bother writing lines for this guy. There's a scene where he's having an argument with Wilford Brimley in the dugout, and he just keeps repeating like the same 3 things over and over.
I don't even think it's an argument. He says, hey, sit down. You're not playing. What do you want me to do? Apologize?
No, sit down.
What do you want me to do? Apologize?
No, you need to shut your mouth and sit down. I'm the manager. Sit down.
I'm not going to apologize. What do you want me to do? Apologize? I'm not going to apologize.
And then they just kill him. And here's the thing. This movie, if I have one complaint about it, is like their solution for everything is death. They're like, okay, you're really good at baseball. We're going to shoot you. Your dad is in the way of the plot progression. He dies. Fuck it. Take the tree out too while we're at it. Bump, you're dead. We don't even see Whammer again. So I guess, something must have happened to him too.
Yeah, and not only that, I feel like they just move on from these deaths and these life-changing moments a little too quickly, I think. Like the guy ran through an outfield wall and died. And then like, all right, let's have a quick ceremony. There are the ashes. All right, cool. Play ball. That was it.
Yeah, nothing. No patches. They put a lightning patch on their fucking shoulder. How about you have a shoulder patch for bum?
Yeah, it shows you what where their priorities are when the bat gets a patch, but not the guy that just ran through the damn right field wall.
I like how they also just couldn't decide like where to put Hobbs. Like there were two guys in the writing room just arguing with each other. Like, you should be an outfielder. Nah, you should be a pitcher. Nah, you should be the best slugger. Nah, you should have a great arm. Fuck it, he does it all.
Yeah, and what he did was insanely difficult nowadays. Like now players are very specialized. I think we're kind of talking about that a little bit before, where they have, everybody has like their own trainer pretty much. But when it comes to actually playing the position, you're very specialized. Like if you're a relief pitcher, like there's guys, if they're left-handed, they're only in to face left-handed hitters. So it's very specialized now. And there's actually only one player in all of baseball right now that pitches and hits and plays the field, Shohei Ohtani from the Angels. But looking for a comparison to what Hobbs did, I think of Rick Ankiel. And so Hobbs started off as a pitcher, and then he gets shot. And then, later, years later, he comes back as a position player, as an outfielder. Now, I don't know if anybody, Big D, I don't know if you remember Rick Ankiel, but
of course,
when he came out as a rookie, he was a pitcher, and he was a very good pitcher. And I felt bad for the guy because I remember watching, I think it was during the playoffs.
Yes, against the New York Mets.
Yeah, he got a horrible case of the yips. Like it wasn't like he was missing the plate by a little bit. It was like Ricky Vaughn, like just a bit outside, but it was not just a bit outside. He was not even hitting the catcher. He was hitting the backstop. Like that's how bad it was. It was a horrible case of the yips, and I felt terrible for the guy. So then a couple years later, I guess he just changed and decided to play outfield. Next thing you know, he actually comes back through the farm system, and he's playing like center field. And what I found a little ironic of that was he had issues throwing the ball 60 feet, 6 inches for a strike. He would actually hose runners at third base from deep center field in the air, like throwing a perfect strike, like 250, 300 feet away in the air with perfect strike, but he couldn't do it 60 feet, 6 inches. So, yeah.
Yeah. He turned out to have a pretty long career playing the outfield. But you talked about specialization, and I don't want to turn this into Shat on Sports, like we're fucking breaking down Major League Baseball, because that's not why people listen to us. But I used to love baseball much more than I do now, and it's because the pace of the game. I don't have fucking 4 hours to watch a Yankee Red Sox game in 162 games. So one of the things that they came out with today was a change in the rules for 2020. If you bring a pitcher in, they have to pitch to at least 3 batters. I think that's going to shave tons of time off the game, and it's very smart.
It's going to kill hot dog sales, though. Guys, I feel like every season when I go to watch the D-backs, there's a game during that season, and I always am at it, where they're like, this is the longest game in D-backs history. And then the next year, they're like, this is the longest. It's gotten to the point where the light rail shuts down, and I can't even get home from the game because it's gone so late. But still a fan of the game, and part of that is the personalities that you see. The D-backs have had their share of incredible players and managers, but nobody is as animated and fun to watch as Wilford Brimley. I think he was a great addition to this movie.
Yeah, I agree. Wilford Brimley he's a great manager, but if I put together a team of movie star ball players, I want Lou Brown, who's played by James Gammon, leading the way. He was fantastic in Major League.
Oh no, Wilford Brimley. He's the best.
I gotta go. No, I gotta go with Lou Brown as well. But I would say that Brimley with a mustache might have helped out. I can't believe they had him trim it down like that. He needs that big old diabetes mustache to really be effective.
Yeah, and one of the scenes I love is when Hobbs comes over and he says, "Oh, I have my contract." His contract was worth $500, which in today's dollars is just a hair over $9,000. So minimum salary now for a professional baseball player is $545,000 a year. And the average Major League Baseball salary is $4.5 million. So the game's changed just a little bit since 1939.
I think that Roy Hobbs could have become a millionaire in this movie. He could have retired after his hitting streak, just trademarked the Wonder Boy bat. Kids would be buying those, left and right. Just make millions sit on it. That's all you got to do.
Absolutely.
And maybe that's what he ends up doing. You mentioned, one of your favorite scenes was the salary scene, Drew. For me, it was the bribery scene, the end of it. So I'm watching this movie and it's starting to wear on me a little bit, where I'm like, oh God, now it's a shadowy figure. Like, I've seen all this before in a million other movies. And the movie just immediately just takes you for a loop, and it shows you that it's not going to sit down and become a snooze fest. When Roy Hobbs is leaving the office and he flicks the light on, and you get to see the judge's face, and it's just brightly lit, and he's like, turn off that infernal light. And it was poking fun at itself. I love a self-aware movie that can have a laugh every now and then, and I thought it really added to the overall atmosphere.
I thought that was The Dark Knight Rising, where it's fucking Bane. You grew up in the dark. What does he say? He says,
you simply adapted to the dark. I was born in it, raised by it.
Yes. Fucking the judge.
Nerds. At a formal dinner, Hobbs meets Memo Paris, played by Kim Basinger, who turns out to be Pop's niece. The two begin spending a lot more time together with growing romantic interest, and Hobbs' gameplay concurrently begins slumping. In a day game against the Cubs, Hobbs breaks out of his slump when a woman in white stands in the seats, catching Hobbs' attention. He immediately proceeds to hit a home run to deep center field, shattering the clock on the scoreboard at Wrigley Field. He realizes the woman is his childhood sweetheart, Iris. The encounter breathes life into Hobbs' game again, restoring his elite hitting. The boost causes the Knights to surge into first place. One day, as the team is coming off the field after practice, some of his teammates ask him to throw a pitch in because they want to hit a few more. Hobbs obliges and throws a strike so hard, the ball wedges into the netting behind home plate to the awe of his teammates.
So we understand there's multiple times that people use words that Roy doesn't know. I understand he's not the brightest guy, okay? He can hit a baseball, but he's not a Rhodes Scholar, a philosopher. But Roy's a fucking idiot. Why would you get involved with another woman, another sports groupie after what happened to you? You know, it's been 16 years. Why would you immediately go back to somebody who looks similar to her? And then once you start hooking up with her, you grow into a slump immediately. You went like 0 for 3 the next day. Wake the fuck up, Roy.
Dude, it's room service. She showed up in his room and got naked. That's addictive, man.
I'm sorry, not as addictive as sick. You've been waiting to get your dream back after getting derailed, and you've learned a lesson. And Pops even says she's bad luck.
Yeah, and also when they're at, I think it was at the team party, she's taken away by some other guy, and he's like, "Come here," and she goes and hangs out with him. Clearly, she's not looking to settle down anytime soon.
Yeah. Also, did you guys catch that she'd been blowing a dude at the hotel prior to meeting up with Hobbs?
What?
I missed that.
She gets in the elevator and very clearly wipes the side of her mouth. She was getting down.
Are you sure?
Yeah, Pops is a bad uncle.
What? Wow.
No, I'm not saying she was blowing Pops. I'm saying he's not looking out for her. He's a bad chaperone.
I thought I missed
Jesus,
something.
guys.
Okay, but I can't blame the team's slump on her. It's their own fucking fault. Pops cuts their locker room party short. He says, listen, we haven't won anything. Let's all just go back to the hotel. Let's go to sleep. We got to win 1 of 3 games. And then right away, Roy and the whole fucking team are out at this party, drinking. Go home, go to sleep. The Knights win the pennant. Roy doesn't get poisoned. Maybe he has another 5 or 6 years in his career. Nothing good happens after 2 a.m.
Right, but you know, I've always wondered as a young man when I was watching professional athletes, I'm like, why do they get married? Like, why would you do that? You're in great shape. You're in the prime of your life. You know, women fawning all over you. Just take advantage of the situation. Why would you want to settle down? There's plenty of time to do that. But I think now I understand it's less risk.
Yeah, I think you need to take a page out of the Derek Jeter playbook there. Stay single until you're retired, and then you get married. Also, it helps being Derek Jeter. So
I was gonna say that might be the key to it.
Yeah.
There's also that.
Derek Jeter used to have a gift pack that he would send all the girls who he would take to his penthouse in Manhattan and have sex with.
Care package.
The next day, they would all get called car service. There'd be a signed baseball, like 2 or 3 things. And none of the girls ever knew it until Jeter unknowingly took the same girl home twice. And the girl got the exact same gift pack, and she like blasted it all over social media.
I'm immediately going to buy like 5 pairs of studio monitors and autograph them just in case. But Roy is showing us that he's more than just a slut. He does have a solid foundation to him. He is still that boy growing up on the farm when he reunites with Iris.
Yeah, and one of the things that I found interesting with Glenn Close, and I thought she did a good job in the movie. I'm not saying she was bad, but she was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. Yet, I wasn't wowed necessarily by her. And I could be wrong by it. Was she even in like half the movie? I feel like she was even in less than that.
Yeah, she really wasn't in a ton of it. She did have some fairly impressive scenes. I remember watching the conversation that they had at the candy shop, at the soda fountain, where they get together, and I'm like, here it is. Here's going to be where this movie just blows me away. And Robert Redford sits down, and he's like, are you married? It's like, hello, it's 1939. Like, that's just what you ask a person. Starting thing that you ask. But it made sense, actually, when you got into it, where you're like, these are people who are not going to do the small talk. Like, these are people who have such a strong foundation, such a strong connection, that they're just getting down to the meat of it. Where are you in life? Is there still a chance that we could be together? They make no bones about it. I love it.
They had a perfect chance, though, to address the fact that Robert Redford was a 46-year-old, 19-year-old. When they sit down, he asks, do I look the same? She says no. She should have been like, yep, you look just the same.
Also, I want to point out that Robert Redford is 10 years older than Glenn Close. I mean, in real life. She looks older than he does in this movie. She looks rough.
Okay.
I'm just saying, that man ages amazingly.
No, he's a good-looking man.
He's the natural.
He's a good-looking man, bad-looking 19-year-old.
Yeah. All right. So later at a team party, Memo slips something into a pastry she feeds Hobbs, and he collapses soon after. He awakens in the maternity ward of a hospital where he learns the Knights have lost 3 games in a row, which sets up a 1-game playoff against the Pittsburgh Pirates. Memo encourages Hobbs to accept the bribe, which has been quadrupled by the judge. Hobbs refuses, and the judge informs him he should reconsider since the judge is also bribing someone else on their team. Hobbs realizes the bribed player is pitcher Al Fowler. Hobbs calls time and comes in from right field to tell Fowler not to throw the game. Fowler smartly replies that he'll start pitching when Hobbs starts hitting. Fowler starts pitching more competitively, and the Knights manage to stay in the game.
Yeah, and when they're in the maternity ward of the hospital there, they have the surgery on Hobbs, and he has that bullet in his stomach still. Like, I couldn't believe that he really left that bullet in his stomach for 16 years. Like, I didn't even know that was even possible. And also, didn't the doctor tell him his stomach would actually explode if he kept playing?
The first times I've seen this, I never really caught that she poisons him. That she obviously gives him something knowing he has a stomach wound that aggravated the ulcer. So they wore the lining down, whatever it was that they gave him. And this goes back exactly to what I was saying. If you'd gone home, like Pop said, none of this would have happened, Roy.
One of my friends was explaining the plot of this movie to me before I actually watched it. And they said, yeah, there's this really weird scene where Kim Basinger feeds Robert Redford a bullet. She didn't feed him the bullet. No. For listeners. I know you guys know that, but listeners at home, it's poison or something. We're not quite, we assume it's poison. It's like tearing up at his stomach lining, but the bullet was in there. He would notice that when he was chewing. You put a bullet in someone's pastry. Just want to clarify that. What I want to know is, we talked about Wilford Brimley being a great manager. Here we see Pops, and he's like, all right, Hobbs, go play fucking outfield. This guy is your best hitter. Get some fucking kid out there to shag fly balls. Why is he out there he's got an injury and you're having him run around, catch balls? Idiot.
Well, it's a National League. There was no DH. You got to get him out there. Your team just lost 3 in a row. You have no hopes. You know, you got to try something. Throw Roy out there. If he dies in the field, I mean, you already had Bum die. What the fuck? Let 2 Knights die in this season.
You could put him at first, I guess. Less running could be an option.
Unless he gets run into, then that would kind of suck.
Well, yeah, that's problematic.
Mm-hmm.
But the judge then offers Hobbs $20,000 to throw the game, which equates to over $360,000 now. So here's my question to you guys. Would you guys throw a game?
Never.
Well, I was shocked. I didn't remember that Roy took it. That Roy was he's all about it. Normally, I'd say no way. But Roy, man, when he tells the story to Iris, He says he was in the hospital for years and then work was scarce. He had no money. If the Knights lose this, his career's over. I can't blame him for taking it. But luckily, the voice comes in, on his shoulder of his dad. Roy, you got to be more. You got to be more. And his dad's voice and Iris. So I understand if he would have taken it, but I'm glad he didn't.
Speaking of Iris, when she visits him in the hospital, I thought it was one of the best written lines of this movie, and it definitely plays into my appreciation of The Natural, is that this movie is very much written like a play, and there are just some really classic lines that, among all the great cinematography and the exciting sports sequences, there are just some really well-written interactions. And Iris comes into the hospital and she talks about believing that we have two lives, because he's basically disappointed in what he's done with himself, that he could have been so much more, that he thought he was going to shatter every record. And she says, I believe we have two lives, the life you learn with and the life you live after that. And I was like, holy shit, that is some of the deepest knowledge ever dropped in a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also one of my favorite quotes, I think, was, and it worked well when you're playing baseball, when I think it was Hobbs' dad was telling him confidence and concentration. I think when you're playing baseball, those two go a long way.
Yeah. Another thing that goes a long way, staying with your fucking starting pitcher. If you're a Pittsburgh fan or you're the pitcher, Youngberry, that dude in a playoff one game, winner take all, go to the World Series, he threw 9 2/3 innings, 3 hits, and you pull him for fucking 2 balls to bloody ass Roy Hobbs 0 for 2 with 2 strikeouts, or the damn third baseman who fucking let 3 of them bull Buckner right through his legs.
Yeah, but without doing that, they couldn't have added the additional layer of parallelism because we didn't have enough of it. They're like, let's bring out, young John Rhodes. He's a Nebraska farm boy, just a phenom coming into the league. And it's like, oh, gee, that reminds me of somebody. They had to do it. This movie could not help itself in taking every opportunity to embrace a trope. I thought it was just a bit much. And the melodrama keeps on piling up as we round third base toward the home stretch for The Natural. So watching the game from the stands with her son, Iris begs an usher to deliver a written note to Hobbs in the dugout, telling him that she has brought his 16-year-old son, to watch him play. In the 9th inning, the Pirates pitcher and catcher see that Hobbs is bleeding through his jersey where his wound is and throw inside in an attempt to harm him. Hobbs connects on an inside pitch which runs foul down the right field line. The ball struck so hard that it splits Wonder Boy in half. Hobbs charges the bat boy Bobby to pick a good replacement bat for him, and he returns with his own bat, the Savoy Special, that Hobbs helped him make as a sister bat to Wonder Boy. Hobbs hits a walk-off home run to win the game and the National League pennant. The Knights advance to the World Series, and the film closes with Hobbs playing catch with his son in the same field that he had with his father many years earlier, while Iris looks on.
So I found myself, as the movie's going on, Roy's having a pretty good year. And I'm like, I wonder what his stats were. So thank God for the internet. I Google Roy Hobbs stats. And in 2001, Bill Simmons, he was with ESPN, somebody asked him who would be the best fantasy sports player from a movie. And he said, without a doubt, Hobbs. So he went and methodically broke down so you could know. He said Hobbs was called up to the majors after the season started. Then Pops buried him on the bench. Then Bump Bailey died. Then he finally got BP. So he doesn't know the exact date of Hobbs' first game. Then he has the 4 home run barrage in Chicago. He breaks it down even to the slump in June, to then, the home runs that they show. And he said in 1939, Roy Hobbs at the age of 35, he had 115 games played, 400 at-bats, 140 hits, 44 home runs. He batted .350, had an OPS of 447, and a slugging percentage of 750. So, yes, it was a legendary season, but I think it's more impressive that Bill Simmons actually sat down and factored this all in.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all, because anybody who's into fantasy sports would be that obsessed with numbers. I don't get fantasy sports, guys. It's that is dorkier than Dungeons and Dragons. Well played, Bill Simmons. Well played.
Yeah, I appreciate you sending that link over. I was looking at those numbers too. Those were pretty impressive. Even with baseball now, I feel like you have the 3 true outcomes. You have a home run, a walk, or a strikeout. And I feel like Hobbs, his numbers that actually translate well into today's game.
Dude, he could even hit a photographer.
This is also true.
He could pick a seat that he was going to hit the ball with.
Yeah, at this point in the movie, I'm starting to turn sour on it. This is like just a fucking cheeseball avalanche. I'm like, okay, they're gonna bring it down to a reasonable ending, not drag the thing out. Nope. They go, I mentioned the young John Rhodes, and then they're like, okay, what else do we got? Well, we really hate, Max Mercy, the reporter, because everybody hates reporters in movies. Let's send a foul ball his way and shatter the fucking press box after we've already broken the clock at Wrigley Field. This guy's just sniping with his bat. Then we get the broken bat, another baseball trope, and then, it's another name bat, the Savoy Special. Hey, kid, way to go, Bobby. Pick me out a good one. I'm just like, come on. Just kill me now.
Oh, dude, but you missed the whole part of the potential avalanche. Iris sends him the note, and instead of returning to the seat with her son, she stands in like the entranceway. She's not even with the son. What's the son doing? Sitting there in the stands alone? There could have been a loving embrace between mom and son, or this like Roy mouthing to the kid, I love you. Love you. Or daddy. That could have been.
Or just the cop showing up for child support.
Yeah. But one thing I like, the game is over. The sparks are falling. It fades into daddy and son playing catch. And we don't know. Did the Knights win the World Series? Pop said he was fine just making it. And in the end, I'm happy. It doesn't matter. We don't need to know.
Do you want to know?
Fuck. Was it from the book?
Yeah.
I feel like they have to have lost.
Yeah, they lost.
Because Roy is not going to be able to duplicate that. He probably does another like 0 for 15 in the series and it's over.
Yeah, they end up losing in the series. But, you're right. It doesn't matter.
That's probably why they left it out. You don't want to end on a sour note,
Yeah, and you were saying, when Hobbs hits that home run, that scene is so iconic. He hits the light tower, the light bulb's exploding, him running the bases in the dark while the shards are falling around him. It's such a great scene, and I feel like when you think of The Natural, I feel like that's the scene that kind of sticks in your brain.
That final inning, and when the theme kicks in, I got goosebumps. And I'm like, oh my God, this theme song is killer. This is awesome. I'm like, who wrote this? And I got to eat a big old fat slice of humble pie. God damn it. It's fucking Randy Newman from fucking Toy Story, the one we tore apart for short people and Korean parents. He wrote this amazing score.
No, man, but we said it during Toy Story that he's not a bad composer. He writes a decent score. He wrote a good score for Toy Story. It's his original songs where he's singing that just suck.
What would the Roy Hobbs song sound like in Toy Story version?
Heart attack killed your dad. Lightning bolt split a tree. I'm going up to bat. It's Wonder Boy and me. Something like that.
And he would end it with, I'm never going to sail again.
And I'm never going to sail again. Carrie Gross.
But so Randy Newman also scored Major League. And it wasn't just me, or did Major League kind of have a similar, it seems similar to The Natural at this point, right? Well, I think The Natural has more like heart, and I feel like it seems more genuine, whereas Major League's more of just like a straight up comedy. Like the montage of when the team sucks early on, when the three players, they kind of come together and they miss that pop-up, like that was right in Major League. The plot of the owner wanting them to lose. Both of the managers have absolutely exquisite mustaches. I feel like there's a lot of things they had in common here.
Yeah, I remember. I loved it in The Natural when the judge, or when Pop made the cutout of the judge, and as the Knights won, they took off pieces of
one little piece,
and it left a naked picture of the judge in the clubhouse. I love that. That was my favorite part.
I think that actually added a wipe for me. It's fucking misogynistic bullshit. All right, gentlemen, now comes the time when we put The Natural through its paces and give it a Shat score. If you're not familiar with the Shat meter, the way we do it is 5 wipes is an absolute mess. It is a gut shot from Harriet Bird, leaving you sprawling on the floor. And 0 wipes is a perfect score. That is a walk-off home run that hits the clock at Wrigley Field, breaks the window at the press box, and also shatters all the lights, sending sparks everywhere while your son and childhood sweetheart appear and cheer you on, and you become the greatest there ever was. Starting with you, Big D, what is your score for The Natural?
So this is the first time in a long time. As we're recording, in my mind, I'm kind of ratcheting up my Shat score. So I started out before we recorded. I want to give it a 1. And as we're recording, I'm like, maybe 1.5. I'm sticking with a 1. I got to be honest with you, what I started with. It is a quintessential sports movie. It has something for fans and non-fans alike. Hobbs, as he's rounding the bases and the sparks, that is iconic cinema at its best. The movie, it is beautiful to watch. My only gripe is it's probably 20, 25 minutes too long. If you trim it down, you cut out bum and some of the other things. But for me personally, this is right up there with sports movies with Hoosiers. That is a quality sports film that still holds up. I'm going to give it a 1. I love it. I got goosebumps. I could be cheesy, thinking of my youth watching baseball. If the only problem is the movie's too long, I'm okay with a 1.
Scored like a true dad haver. All right, Drew, you're up.
So while I do like this movie a lot, I felt like it still has its flaws. I love the story of Roy Hobbs, but at 137 minutes, I don't love it that much. The movie, I felt dragged at certain points. I think we've all touched it at some point. There's definite areas where they could have shaved some time off. And also maybe I was just tired when I watched it. I still split it up over 2 nights. I split the movie in half and I was still checking the clock both nights. But I love the baseball action. Robert Redford was great. But there's a handful of other baseball movies I'd rather watch right now, like Major League, Bull Durham, even Mr. Baseball, not Mr. 3000. The Sandlot's a great one. So while I do like this movie a lot, I think I need to go 2 wipes here.
All right, so that's Big D holding true with 1 wipe. Drew's in at 2 wipes. Drew, I'm glad you actually brought up that idea of other baseball movies because you're absolutely right. I did enjoy this movie, but compared to a Bull Durham, a Mr. Baseball, a Sandlot, it's not up there for me. And I think the biggest problem is that this movie does dip into mythology, but it can't decide which myth it wants to follow. So there's a lot of stuff in there. There's Sword in the Stone in there. There's the Tale of Percival in there. They're just mixing and matching all sorts of myths, and maybe that's the idea, is an amalgamation of several different legends. But it was a bit much for me. I wish they would have stuck with 1 or 2 miracles. That being said, Robert Redford has a class that you do not see on screen anymore. This guy is magic on the screen. He is what a man should aspire to be. He's right up there with Paul Newman for me, as far as looking at a guy on screen and going, that is how you conduct yourself, and still playing a character. I was once taught in theater at Arizona State University that it was all about taking the character and then finding the parts of you that connect with it and making it your own. And I think Robert Redford does it beautifully with Roy Hobbs. The movie is written like a play. It is sheer theater. There's an incredible economy of words. Really great use of lighting. Big D talked about the cinematography. I don't know if you guys noticed, but there was the sunsets or the sun streaming through the ballpark, the way it would light certain people up, the way it would light Iris up, or when Roy Hobbs returns to the clubhouse after being in the hospital, and he's leaning on that wall. He's looking at Pops while Pops is shaving. You get that golden light radiating off his hair. It's like a halo. It's really, really beautiful. Also, a little bit of light on Pops' chest hair, which was kind of nice. But another thing I noticed about this movie that we haven't mentioned is there is realistic interaction with the environment. Big D, you mentioned at the carnival that you feel like you're at the carnival with the smoke and the sounds and all that. You see Robert Redford playing with these ballparks like he is actually in the ballpark with an actual crowd. When he's looking around the crowd, it's believable. He even at one scene is going over to talk to Iris, and he misidentifies where the turnstile is and has to move a couple feet over to find it and get around it. It just felt really real to me. And I think that another true measure of an actor is the way that they react to like a phone call or a note. Robert Redford doesn't overplay it. When he's reading the notes from Iris, he has realistic reactions to it. It's exactly the way a person would react in real life. I loved all of that. I did notice that although this is baseball, and you had mentioned before that they haven't integrated the league yet, there are like no minorities in this movie at all. Like not even in the band, not even at the hotel. Like it is an all-white cast, except for the only minority would be women. and the women have no important roles here. Like, their only role here is to inspire men. I found that a big missed opportunity. And again, we're talking about how things hold up in 2019. We're just in an era now where women can be characters and have their own autonomy and have their own thoughts. So I do wish that, I think for this movie to hold it up in 2019, it has to have that sort of aspect to it. So for me, guys, this is a 2-wiper. I agree with you, Drew, 2 wipes. And together, that 1 wipe, 2 wipe, and 2 wipes averaged out comes out to a Shat score of 1.6 repeating average.
So with a Shat score of 1.66 repeating, that now ties it in the number 36 spot with Gremlins, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and War Games. It is slightly better than Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Starship Troopers, and it is a little bit worse than Spaceballs, Scrooged, and The Thing.
I feel real guilty about that. I think this is one of those times where the system actually does not work, and it's
right because you're
fault.
the guy who said, "I love the acting. It was beautiful. It was so real. It was just the lighting." And then you're going to penalize it because in 1939 there were no powerful female roles. What the fuck do you want? Do you want a slavery movie where there's a black superhero? It was slavery times. This was 1939. What did you want?
It's not 1939. It's 1984.
They're telling a time. It wouldn't have been period appropriate. In 1939, the definition of male and female roles was very different than today. Do you agree?
I agree.
So don't put your 2019 expectations on gender roles, barriers, and characters when we are seeing a representation of 1939.
I'm not saying I want Memo to own the team. I'm saying, could Iris have some thoughts of her own? Could she, could we see a little bit more into who she is and what she's all about? We don't see any of that. All she's there to do is inspire Roy to hit home runs.
Okay, so in a movie that's already 2 hours and 30 minutes, you want some exposition about why Iris has decided to keep the family farm?
Yeah, maybe that as opposed to a bump. Or maybe one fewer walk-off home run and we get a little more Iris. Anyway, just saying. For me, it feels wrong, but I think it feels wrong because Gremlins is overrated.
So, Drew, I want to end this on a trivia question that I just came to. We're going to test your knowledge.
Okay.
In Mr. Baseball, Tom Selleck is replaced in spring training because there's a young stud first baseman.
That's right.
What Major League Baseball player and Hall of Famer plays that rookie first baseman?
That would be Mr. Frank Thomas.
Very good. Good job. Nice. Good job.
Is that the Big Hurt?
Yeah, he's doing now male enhancement commercials.
It's not just male enhancement commercials. It's like I fucked your wife commercials.
Yeah. Hey, Frank, you look great. Oh, I feel stronger than ever. You should see me in the bedroom. My wife is loving it. I take male enhancement XP.
Not a sponsor.
No, not yet. Hims, we're waiting for you.
All right, and that wraps it up for The Natural. Big D, what do we have coming up next?
So next week, it is a commissioned podcast. An eccentric childlike man loves his red bicycle and will not sell it to his envious neighbor. While away visiting a friend, his bike is stolen. Thinking his bike is at the Alamo, he sets off on a trip where he meets many remarkable people, including waitress Simone, a motorcycle gang. He eventually discovers that his bicycle is being used in a movie and tries to recover it. This is commissioned by our friend Carmelita Valdez McCoy from California. Stay to the trailer and listen to what we'll be doing next week.
What could it be? All right. Thanks, Big D. Thanks, Drew. That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. The website is shatthemovies.com. Our email address is host@shatthemovies.com, where you can write in, give us feedback, and even suggest a movie category. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can donate through PayPal, Venmo, or Amazon. Just go to shatthemovies.com/PayPal/Venmo or /Amazon. Also, if you'd like to take a survey to help us find sponsors that best fit your tastes, go to shatthemovies.com/survey. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a review. That helps the podcast grow. And also check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, Game of Thrones, True Detective, and we're currently doing American Gods. Yes, it's back. It's on Stars, and it's actually not that bad. You can find all that information on our website, shatontv.com. If you'd like to catch Drew on his own podcast, you can go to the One Headlight 90s podcast. And if you have trouble finding it, just go check the show notes for this show. Big D has tucked that link in there. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, Drew Zachman, Carrie Gross, and the King Bee, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for the following movie.
Warner Brothers is proud to present the story of a guy.
Good morning. I'm here.
And his bike.
James Bond kind of stuff.
Together for the first time in their first big movie.
I meant to do that.
We killed it.
Yeah! I say we let him go.
Merry Christmas!
Pee-wee Herman is Pee-wee Herman.
Hello!
In Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Be sure and tell him Large Marge sent ya.